partner was. He'd trotted alongside Rowdy's horse for the first few miles out of Haven, but then he'd gotten footsore and come the rest of the way in the saddle. As they traveled north, the weather got colder, and they'd shared Rowdy's dusty old canvas coat. Remembering the looks they'd gotten from the townsfolk, him and partner, riding into town barely an hour before, Rowdy smiled. Even with a new and modern century underway, the Arizona Territory was still wild and woolly, and odd sights were plentiful. He wouldn't have thought a man and a dog on the back of the same horse would attract so much notice. "You run along and see to those steaks," Rowdy told Jolene. Even with a bucketful of hot water she'd just poured into his tub, the bath was lukewarm, and there was cold air coming up through the cracks between the ancient warped floorboards. He wanted to scrub himself down with the harsh yellow soap provided, dry off, and get into the clean duds he'd saved for the purpose. Of course, partner needed sudsing too, and there was that to do. Rowdy didn't reckon even Jolene's services extended quite that far. Jolene hadn't had her fill of visiting, that much was clear by her disgruntled aspect. But she lit out for the kitchen just the same. Rowdy finished his bath, dressed himself, laundered partner as best he could. He was toweling the poor critter off with a burlap feed sack when he heard the sound of spurs chinking just outside the door. Rowdy didn't hold with the use of spurs, branding irons, or barbed wire. Whenever he encountered any one of those three things, he bristled on the inside. Out of habit, he touched the handle of his .44 just to make sure it was on his left hip where it ought to be. Partner bared his teeth and snarled when two drifters strolled in. "Easy," Rowdy told the animal, rising from a crouch to stand facing the strangers. One was short and the other tall. Both were in sore need of a bath, not to mention the services of a dentist. The short one looked partner over, scowling, his right hand eased toward the .45 in his holster. Rowdy's own .44 was in his hand so fast he might have willed it there instead of drawing. "I wouldn't," he said affably. "It's a hell of a thing when a man's expected to bathe himself in a dog's water," the taller one observed. He had a long, narrow face full of sorrow and thin brown hair that clung to the shape of his head, as if afraid of blowing away in a high wind. "For an extra nickel," Rowdy said, "you can have your own." The short man took a step toward Rowdy, and it was the tall one who reached out an arm and stopped him. "Me and Willie here, we don't want no trouble. We're just looking for hot water and women." Willie subsided, but he didn't look too happy about it. Rowdy reckoned he'd have shot partner just for being there if he'd had his druthers. Fortunately for him, his sidekick had interceded before it would have been necessary to put a bullet through his heart. Partner, who looked a sight with his fur all ruffled up from the rub-down with a burlap sack, standing upright on his hide like quills on a porcupine, growled low and in earnest. Yes, sir, Rowdy thought, looking down at him. He did want barbering. "That dog bite?" Willie asked. A muscle twitched in the beard stubble along his right cheek. He carried himself like a man of little consequence, determined to give another kind of impression. "Only if provoked," Rowdy answered mildly, slipping the .44 back into its holster. He was hungry, but he tarried, for it was his habit to take careful note of everyone he encountered, be they friend or foe. Pappy had taught him that, and it had proved a useful skill. Just then, Jolene trundled in, with the littlest Chinaman Rowdy had ever seen trotting behind her. The sight put him in mind of a loaded barge cutting through the muddy Mississippi, with a rowboat bobbing in its wake.
10 cents if you want clean water,
Jolene told the new arrivals, clearly relishing the prospect of ready commerce.
A nickel if you don't mind second-hand.
Willie and the sidekick didn't look as though they were in a position to be too picky. "A dime for a tub of hot water?" Willie demanded, aggrieved. "It's plain robbery." The tall man took a tobacco sack from the inside pocket of his coat and dumped a pile of change into a palm. After counting out the coins carefully, he handed them over to Jolene. "We'll have the best of your services," he said formally. The Chinaman, strong for his size, nodded at a go-ahead from Jolene.